We are going to look at one of Google's products called Jamboard. The easiest way to access Jamboard is by going through Google's 9-dot waffle to the Google Apps. I'm accessing it through Google Drive. You can get to it from any Google product, whether it just be searching Google, Gmail, as long as you can get to the 9 dots to get to the Google Apps. Depending on where you have it located in yours, you may have to scroll down a little ways. And then it's going to have a yellow circle with a orange line. Looks like it's in the shape of a J for Jamboard. You can also access it just like any other Google product, jamboard.google.com. So this is going to take you to the dashboard of any recent jams that have been created within Google Jamboard. So I'm going to start by switching this drop down here. Right now it's set to be owned by anyone, and I'm going to change it so that it is owned by me. So these are any of them that I've looked at recently or open. And now these are only the ones that I have created myself. Also on this, you have your refresh. You could sort it into A through Z. You can change your view, and you can also get a direct link to open a jam. In the bottom right corner, you have an orange button to open, to start a new jam. So that's very different from any of the other Google products, being down in your bottom right corner. So I'm going to start a new jam. So what is a jam? Think of it like an interactive slideshow. So if we think of a PowerPoint or Google Slides slideshow, you're going to have a bunch of slides that you can put different multimedia on it. What makes a jam different is that you can write on it like with a pen, as well as sharing it and making it interactive and collaborative with your students. Now, as we talk about that interactive piece, I want to point this out right up here. It says open on a Jamboard. So we in the Green Bay School District do not own Jamboards. They are an interactive flat panel, similar to our smart boards or clear touches that we have across the district. But we as a district right now do not open a Jamboard. I do not know how these jams interact on a smart board, as this is kind of new for some of us playing with this product. So something that if you want, you can try out if you have one of those once we get that into our classrooms. But you can do a lot of this right on your screen. So let's take a look at some of the things that we have in a jam. So up across the top here, this is going to be all of your different pages that you, or frames as they call it, that you have in a jam. So in a slideshow, it's always listed on the far left side. In a jam, it's across the top. So I can have up to 20 different frames. So if I add a frame, I'll have my second one here. Then I have some other choices as well. If you grab one, you can move your frame just like you can in any other slideshow. If I want to add a frame before slide 1, between slides 1 and 2, or after slides 2. So once again, you can have up to 20 different frames. You also have the option underneath those 3 dots to just delete a frame if you no longer need it, or you can duplicate that frame if you wanted to have a second page that was similar to it. So we're going to just start right now with those 2 frames. Then you have across the top here, if you wanted to zoom in, get closer obviously, your clear frame is anything that's on this frame, this slide here. You'll erase it off of there. And then you also have some different background options. Now, a lot of the tools that are within a jam, they're pretty limited, I think, for what Google products are often known for. There's not a whole lot of choices. So the background of your jams, you can have dots. So you just have little gray dots, so you can use that for a variety of products. Just line rules, they're pretty tiny, so depending on what you're using. Then they have the squares as well as a graph. These are going to be very similar, except for squares are white and the graph paper has that gray background with the white lines on it. So if you were doing some math, you could use this to draw some graphing and draw your parabolas or whatever it is you're looking for. Then they have just the plain colors. So they have a blue, a black, as well as a white. Sometimes as I've been playing with this, I have brought in some pictures and blown it up to make it look like a background, but then I can move that. And we'll take a look at what that looks like in just a second. So those are just a couple of your choices. I'm going to leave it as white just to make it a little bit easier. Across the left side, we have all of these different tools. So we're going to start at the top. We have our pen tool. If I click on it a second time, then I have a pen, I have a marker, a highlighter, and then I have a brush. And as you can see, you only have 6 color choices. This is me taking a guess, but I'm guessing that due to the Jamboards and the way the gems are created, that's why we're limited to colors. But I don't know that for sure. So if I choose one of them and then I choose my color, it'll change that color there so you know what it is that you're using. So right now I'm actually using my actual mouse that I purchased myself. So if I was going through here, I can use my mouse to write it. I can also, now so I'm using my trackpad on my teacher device. I can do that. So if you have students using with their trackpads, you can do that as well. And then the other great thing is because we have our teacher yogas that are touchscreen, I can now grab my stylus and I can use my stylus to write on here as well. So that's really nice to be able to write things as you're going through on this slide. You also have the small eraser tool so that if you just wanted to erase one small part, you have that option. There is the select tool. Right now I have nothing on my frame that I can select. Once you have your writing on here, you cannot select that. That is directly on there. You can only erase that. You do have sticky notes, which are kind of fun, and you can do a couple different things with them. If you wanted, you could write your directions in a sticky note so that you can move them around. If you notice across the bottom, the more I would type, the more this would be here. Letting you know how much space. So you do have there's a finite amount of space that you can use on the sticky note, as well as a couple of different color choices. When I click save, it's going to drop it in and going to give me an option for another sticky note. If I wanted to write more, I could. Otherwise, I can just click my cancel. Now, you'll notice that my select tool is highlighted. So now I can grab this and I can move this select tool. I can also rotate it a little bit and I can make it bigger if I want it. It does make it pretty much a pretty small size based on what your words are. You also have the option to edit. If you realize that you misspelled directions or something wrong in there, you can go in there and edit. You can also duplicate it. If you wanted to have a couple different pieces, you can then duplicate that and have it on here. So let's stick that to the corner here. Continuing with our tools on our left side, there is also the option to add image. And because it is a Google product, you're going to have a bunch of variety of locations to get your images from. So your normal, upload from your own computer. You have the option to search through your Google Photos, your Google Drive, or you can do the Google image search. If I wanted to bring in, as I'm doing this the week before 4th of July, if I wanted to bring in a picture of fireworks, I'll give it that little bit of time to bring it in. Also remembering then, depending on what you have and what you're using it for, to think about your copyright. I can then make it a little bit bigger, depending on the size, because this picture is not a horizontal one. It will be really hard to completely fill this, but I can fill it up quite a bit if I drop that in there. Now, notice how when I'm not selecting it, then my text comes through. So if I don't want that word Jamboard on top of my picture, if I select my picture, it's hidden and I can't see it, But the second I click off, that word is there. So if I no longer want that, I could go through and erase all of it. So I'm just seeing my pictures. The last tool is the laser tool. So the laser tool, think of it like your laser pointer, but it maintains the line for a little bit longer. So if you were, let's say I'm recording this or I'm presenting this screen to my students and I want to show them something, but I don't actually want to write or really highlight it on the page permanently, I can use my laser tool to say, here are your directions. Please make sure you read them. And then my laser tool goes away. This would also be a great way if you were working with a student in collaboration and they're like, well, what is that thing there? Well, obviously they can't come point to it, but they could use that laser tool and they could be pointing it out here. So they're not actually writing on your picture. And you can say, oh, that's the beginning of the fireworks shooting off. And so now without them being, if they're not able to fully explain it, they can also use that laser tool. So now what are some things that you can do? So those are the basic functions of what you can do with a jam. Obviously, you can get very in-depth with some of the things that you're doing on this, but what makes this really a useful tool to use with your students is the fact that you can share this and make it collaborative. So if I click on my three little dots here, I just want to show you do have the option to rename it. I can also rename it up here. Once you're done with everything, you can download it or save it, as well as make a copy. I could see saving it if you were doing something with a whole group, but you don't want them to anymore be able to edit it. You just want them to see what you have. You could download it as that PDF or just save a single frame as an image to then post into your Seesaw or your Google Classrooms. I could also see if you were using this with your students to save it as a PDF to then be able to save for your educator effectiveness. Now, what am I talking about when I'm talking about sharing this with my students? So just like any other Google product, I can get a share link. I could grab my link and I could drop it into a Google Classroom and make it so that anyone who gets it gets their own copy. So just like any other Google Doc, so that each student has their own copy that they can then be working on. And so they can be solving the assignment or whatever it is. I could also individually send this to a student and we could be working in real time. If I send this to a student who then opens it up as well, we can be working while in completely different places. You'll see that Raquel's student has joined. And so now on their slide, they could be drawing. And once I'm done drawing, it will show up on my screen that they've done it. Now, one thing to note, you could see that there was a little picture icon showing that she was writing. So if I go again, you can see that there's the icon, but because they don't have a picture icon, I can't see it. Now, the one other thing to note is if you share a jam with a whole class and everyone is working on it at once, if something were to write something inappropriate or something you need to ask about or get clarifying questions, you won't know who actually did it. So you do need to set up some of those rules ahead of time. When I click on this, I can't see who did that. So if you're concerned about students writing inappropriate things on others, you might want to limit it to who all is in one, just because unlike a Google Doc, you can't see who made the changes. So you would just want to be cautious about that. But it's nice because then while we're in separate places or maybe we're working asynchronously, if I go through and I am working on some math problems for them and I want them to be going through and solving it, and I want them to then work through it so that I can see what they're talking about, then having them draw it out. sorry, I'm trying to do this quickly as I'm demonstrating. We'll make some sad faces. I like this. And yes, I know I'm doing this incorrectly. So as my student went through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So now I, as the teacher, I can add, sticky notes. I can add little pieces. Remember, if you have 3 circles, the other number must be the amount inside the circle. Whoop. Autocorrect me, not me there. So I can leave that note for the student and let them know that they're going to have to go back in and fix it. And so on theirs now they can see that and then they can go and fix it. So it's a great way to be able to be working on that whiteboard together at the same time as a student. Potentially, depending on when you're watching this, I am recording this at the end of June, but Google has said that they are working on getting JAMs to be integrated directly into Google Meet. So if we continue doing some or doing some distance learning and we're using Google Meets for some of our learning, they have talked about potentially having this whiteboard, this JAM, be part of Google Meet, so you could easily open it and whoever is in there would be able to write on it. We haven't seen what that looks like just yet, as they have not yet released it, or if they have, I haven't seen it yet, but that is supposed to be coming down the way. If I click on my Jamboard home, I'm just going to click open a different one just to show a little bit of a collaboration that I was doing with in another training. So now I can see I have this untitled jam. I really need to start naming these jams that I've been practicing on. So this Jamboard training session, I held the full session with live class, and we worked on this one. Now you'll notice it looks identical because it says template here. So the reason being is I took the link to this Jamboard training session jam and I posted it into my Google Classroom, and it turned it into the template that all my students would then be able to have to work on. So while we were in the live training, I shared out the link to this jam, and I would in a second. Let's see if it'll pull it up. Kind of slow. Just by hovering, you'll notice it says "People at Green Bay" with the link. So I just grabbed this link and I shared it with everyone in Green Bay. Could be an editor, and I dropped that into my Google Meet. And so as we had gone through it, we had started adding some different ideas of ways we could be using this jam. So I was talking about like some different product things that you could be doing. We could be having them do some different drag and drop activities, whether it be states, capitals, colors. I know a lot of people have done a lot of different slideshows with some of these, with like, labeling things differently. I really think a Jamboard would be really efficient, just because it allows you to do some of that writing that you can do, and you can add those pictures in whatever way you want. So we'll look through a couple of these frames here. This is where we're talking about. You can do some annotating over your images, whether you're identifying, sorting them, whatever way you want. And then we were looking at like different classes, physical education, how can you make them interactive? Talking about science, some of that sequencing of the steps. It might be a little bit easier to do some of those more complicated science formulas that you really have to work through if you're able to write it. Not always easy if you're using a mouse. My R for my pi is a little bit weird, but it would make it maybe a little bit easier for some of the products that the students use, because on a Chromebook they would have access, and depending if it is a touch screen or not would determine what they have access to then. So with social studies, we could look at some different maps of regions, some different religions if you're looking at it, doing some different comparing and contrasting. You could easily do a Venn diagram, throw on a couple circles. I would pull in an image of a circle that is semi-see-through, and then I would just have them either write it or drop in sticky notes of it. So we have a lot of different ideas, summarizing some things together, doing some different sequencing. I know for the younger students, a lot of times we talk about what is the sequence of a story. So if you bring in pictures, and they can easily move them around, and then they could add some of their own little pieces of information to it. So it's nice because, as you can see, we have one person, row right here in the middle, but then other people could drop in their own sticky notes around the side. I like this one too, kind of a graffiti wall or an exit ticket to share their learning. So some more different elementary, some different word their way sorts. I know, at our elementary level, they have to cut them out, and it's part of it. That's sorting. This is just might be, especially if we are in a virtual, this might be another way to be able to get them those word sorts and be able to move their words around. This was kind of a cool idea too, using it as a yearbook. Just some different people drawing out some different maths and graphing, sorting those congruents. I know in our bridges, that is one thing that they work on. Calculus. Over my head, I haven't used it in a long time, but you can bring those different pictures in so that you can talk those through. One person also suggested, like if you had a really complicated one, that I know some of our high school really like Microsoft Word because they're able to add some more formulas and it just has a few more features to it when they're doing those more in-depth formulas. You could even use your snipping tool and save that image from Microsoft Word, and you could paste it in here to then work through it, maybe in a handwriting way. So just some different thoughts. Some of your, sorting out your math and stuff. So there are a lot of different ways that you can use this in that collaborative feature. So it's just kind of working through to figure out what can you do and how can you use it to make it work. So once again, both you and students have full access to Jamboard. It's going to be accessible through any of the 9-dot Waffle Google Apps menu. When you click on that, you're going to scroll down just a little ways, and then depending on what kind of apps you all have listed in here, it's going to be that yellow circle with the orange line that says Jamboard. You can also access it by going to jamboard.google.com.